Now, I mean, am I supposed to know that as a realtor? I'm not responsible for that as a realtor?
Nice to meet you.
Right, but,
Here.
so now if you're there on the inspection and now it's brought up, like, hey, be aware, suspected asbestos tiles may have been there. I know. Now it's documented that you do know. Or if you're even just there, so Anita was saying that if you ever get the report emailed to you, it's assumed that you know everything in it.
Well, I assume that we didn't get the report.
Right, so that's why a lot of times the sales agent would, don't even send it to me.
I actually just had a conversation the other day too with somebody who recommended that, 'cause remember in the bus I got, I sometimes will ask for snippets of it.
Yeah.
And if they send the whole thing, if you write in an email though.
Hey, how are you?
Something else is gonna, if you send it to me, I won't open it. I don't know if that protects them, but I know that somebody should do that. Like, do not send me a report when it comes to buyers.
So I think it helps,
Yeah, it helps.
but could they pierce through that?
Definitely.
I think so, if it was a big enough problem.
Yeah.
And it depends on how the verbiage is in, like, whether you use like the MAR form or the GREB form or like, so a lot of times they're sending you stuff is because they're renegotiating or they're backing out. So however it's documented on what they need to do to back out.
Yeah.
So if it's like, well, it says I need to send you the report in order to back out. Well, now it gets sent to you. Now it's assumed if you have it, you know everything in it. And now you're the listing agent and now you disclose everything
Yeah.
to the next one. So it's,
And I was in a class one day that they said, even if they send it to you and you delete it, you never looked at it, you don't want it, you still have.
That's what you were saying.
it's assumed, yep.
Nope, sorry.
And then what we were talking about too, you're saying like as a listing agent, if you're there on the property, well, now it's, the home inspector says that you're there, and like it's documented that you're there, and same thing, that if you're there, it's assumed that you were there for everything and you heard everything.
I don't know why they're
I know. I've done it. I'm not. I don't anymore.
Right.
I've really done it.
Yeah, I was saying the only time that I would think that, like, I'm not a real estate agent, but if I was a listing agent, if my seller was just very adamant that they needed me there, they didn't trust these people in their home, and it's like, all right, well, I am working for you. I need to work in your best interest besides just protecting. So like, that's kind of a gray area, but like if, in general, like, if you guys should try not to be there.
By the way, I don't think it's 7 or 9.
For, oh, the 9x9.
It's 9 by 9.
9 by 9.
That didn't sound.
9 by 9 are the typical asbestos tiles, but there can be 6 by 6, it can be 12 by 12, and it's usually not the asbestos in the actual tile. It's more like the mastic underneath. So then you get to test it. So, but the 9 by 9 is generally always asbestos.
Doesn't sound confusing.
Yeah, it's 9 by 9. All right, so I know, I saw this starts at 1. Feel we can come in and out. As we go on, I mean, I can talk about home inspections all day long with the technical aspect. I don't want to bore you guys with that kind of stuff. So I want to make this as helpful to you guys as possible. So feel free to jump into questions. I have plenty of pictures that we can talk about, but any interaction, feel free to just jump in, especially because it's a small group. So I want you guys to get all your questions answered and get as much out of this as you can. So I do have a presentation together now that we'll go through, but I can stop, skip, and go through pretty much anything you want. So who I am, for those of you who don't know me, there's a lot of familiar faces here, for those who don't. Because I have the title here, I'm GM, CEO of Argent Inspections. We have about 12 guys now kind of scattered around the state. Southern New Hampshire, all of Eastern Mass. So basically anywhere you guys go, we cover. So if you ever need us, we'll be there for you. Personally, I'm licensed in Mass, New Hampshire, contractor, home inspector for at least 10 years. Maine doesn't have a license when it comes to home inspections. So in case you're wondering that, we do home inspections in Maine, but you guys could also do a home inspection. Rhode Island now has a license. Yep, so you do need to be a licensed person. As of right now, we didn't do the, it's reciprocal, but we haven't done the paperwork to do that yet. There's a guy that I know really well, that if you were doing work in Rhode Island, I would refer you to him. He does inspections very similar to us, and so it would be easy transfer of that. Same thing, like if you go way out west in Western Mass, I would send you to a different guy who's similar to us. Or if it's you guys, I would probably just go. I was gonna say, like,
Ours is, but,
I was gonna say, we go pretty far, especially if it's someone that we know. Yeah, we all used to manage. Licensed pest professional, blah, blah, blah. Don't care about it. Quick stuff about the company, just things that we offer. So if your clients ever ask, why do you recommend RJ Inspections? This bullet point, I mean, it's on a lot of our marketing stuff, but just real quick, the sellers, I mean, the buyers, it's money back guarantee if they're not happy at the end of the inspection, and they think we did a bad job, money back guarantee, we stand by our work. 90-day warranty, anything we say that's fine, that's within our scope, turns out it's not, it's covered, within that warranty. We offer a free termite inspection with home inspection, where most people charge extra, so that's very handy for the people that work at VA. So when they require wood spring insect inspection, we use their paperwork, we provide it for free. We document it on the invoice that it's free termite, so you can push it right through, since they're not allowed to pay for it, right? So homeowner protection, digital reports, video reports, which I can show you. Spanish speaking inspectors for people that have clients that prefer Spanish or only speak Spanish. We've been around 30 years, 7 days a week, nights and weekends. And if you Google us, you'll see we have about 1,200 reviews, and we have a 5-star rating.
So you guys are not general talk for 7 days a week. You get from 3 o'clock on 4th of July.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you guys, every home inspector that comes on, I tell them, you guys work 7 days a week, and you guys need coverage 7 days a week. So every guy that comes on, I tell them, your availability needs to be 5 days a week. One of those days needs to be a weekend. So they can kind of finagle their weekend in their schedule, but everybody is at least working weekend. That's when a lot of times your clients don't, have the opportunity to take time away from work. So a lot of you, I know a lot of veteran realtors here, some of you are newer, so I mean, I'll kind of just give you the basics of a home inspection, what comes right out of our standards. So tell you what it is and what is not, just so you can kind of prep your clients for that. What it is just important words here. General visual inspection of readily accessible and observable areas. That's straight out of our standards. And what that means is it's not technically exhaustive. We're not ripping things apart. I can't see through walls. If they have the access to the attic nailed shut, I can't grab a crowbar and pull those things apart. So I can't damage the house. We're a guest in the people's house, right? Like even you guys, your clients don't own the house yet. So we're not allowed to really destroy things and be too technically exhaustive because, we hope that they buy this home, but what if they don't? And now I destroyed it. And who's paying for that now?
It even comes down to sometimes a matter of if they like packed a bunch of furniture into like a corner of a space.
Absolutely. So you guys, as like listing agents too, you guys, you declutter the house, right? When you're prepping to sell it, take your photos, all that stuff's got to go somewhere, right? Usually it's up in the basement or garage or something like that. Just be aware. I mean, choose carefully where you put that stuff. Tell your clients, don't just pile it in front of the electric panel. Because if I go down and now it's all these dishes and plates, well, we're not going to move that. And it actually says in our standards that we're not required to, technically not required to move anything. I know a guy back in the day, it says that we don't even need to provide lighting. So he wouldn't even show up with a flashlight. He said, whatever I can get at. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous end of the spectrum, but I mean, you get the idea of just make things accessible. A snapshot in time in the condition of the home, right? The reason I put that is because a lot of times people will ask us, okay, they fixed this. Can you change that in the report? It's like, no, that's a legal document representing that point in time when we were there. So it's nothing that can be changed on that report. Can we put an amendment to it? Can we make a reinspection with a different form? Sure, but we can't actually change what was there. So just be aware of that. The other thing to think about with that is that snapshot in time, right? So we're on site for a couple hours. That house has existed for maybe 100 years. So if we see like, a little crack or some movement, we can't tell you the entire history of that. We can't tell you the extent of that. Is it frequent? Is it recent? Is it continuing to move? There's telltale signs that we'll look for. Is it showing signs of frequent or recent movement, throughout? But it's just, hey, this is the condition of what I see to that. I can tell you if that, appears to be something major, if you need to follow up with, an engineer or something like that. But just remember, it's just what we see at that time. Major system components. I love that analogy talking about a general practitioner, because if you think about it, you guys go to the doctor, they're physical, right? Just, head to toe, everything. if they see something specifically wrong, like, okay, something I understand, go to a dermatologist. I think this could be a problem, or talk to the dermatologist. You go see a cardiologist. The home inspection is very similar to that. Our standards, kind of restrict what we're allowed to say about certain stuff. And, home inspectors aren't always licensed electricians, licensed contractors. I mean, some are, or licensed HVAC guys. So if there's something specific, it's just, talk to the electrician, talk to this. So it's a great analogy if you're going to tell your clients like what to expect from this. I always like that one. And again, standard of practice, if the state sets what we can or can't do, they tell us what to identify, what to observe and report on, what to describe, what we shall and shall not do. So it's very strict. So there's certain things, and I'll go over the stuff that we're not allowed to do, just so you're aware of, again, setting expectations. But it all comes down to what the state lets us do. So what it's not, again, architects or engineers, not technically exhaustive, it's not pass fail. So it's not to say like, hey, this house failed. Like there's too many things wrong with this. You get an F on the house. It's not that. It's just a description of the house, of its condition. So, I mean, you get what you pay for. We were just kind of talking about that. Like if a home is priced low, right? There's a lot of things wrong with it. We're there to describe pass fail versus value. Like you guys are the real estate professional. You tell them the value of the home. We just tell them the condition, pretty much, right? It's not for insurance purposes. It doesn't eliminate all the risk in home ownerships. So, I mean, anyone here who owns a home, there's always stuff that comes up. So anyone buying the house needs to be aware of that. And it's not code. So a lot of times the code helps guide us through to what can be improved upon, what fails, stuff like that. But it's not a code inspection. A 100-year-old house isn't up to code. Close to nothing in that house is going to be up to code. So if we went through, then everything would just be red. So a lot of times, like if you're with your clients, a helpful question to ask is like, because we're going to write up every little thing that we say, right? But I always tell the clients, like, there's a big difference between an upgrade and a correction, right? Like this failed, it's broken, it should be fixed. This could be upgraded. There's something better that's available. This is, not up to today's standard. So if you have an inspector who's, an alarmist, and we all know those people that are out there, and they act like the entire house is going to fall down unless you, upgrade everything. That's a good question to ask. Like, is this something that you feel needs to be corrected because it was wrong, or is it upgraded and it was installed, to the standards when they built it? You know what I mean? Stuff like that can kind of help guide you through a little bit better and calm your client down. So it's going to depend on, do you have, a first-time home buyer client that's terrified of everything, and you end up with that inspector that's, alarmist and terrifying, like the perfect storm of that. So know those kind of terms to kind of help yourself. And it's not, prediction of the future. We offer, warranties, so if we say it's fine, but technically it's not within our scope. This is an important slide because this is stuff that you guys need to know of what we're not allowed to say. So there's stuff that's beyond our scope that we're not required to look at, stuff that we're not responsible for. But then there's stuff we're not allowed to do. The state tells us you cannot do this, or you can get in trouble with your license or fines and all that kind of stuff. So reporting on the market value of the property. Anyone who's been on the home inspections, people will ask that, say, well, what do you think this house is worth? Like, well, one, I'm not qualified to talk about that. This isn't an appraisal. I'm not the real estate professional. I haven't been looking at houses with you for the past, it's recently like 3 months and looking at 100 houses. So the home inspector is not someone that should be talking about the market value of the property in the first place, and not allowed to. So if you hear somebody talking about that, they really step out of line with that. Advising the client on purchasing the property. Again, I don't know what they're paying. I don't care what they're paying. I'm here to tell you about the condition of the home. So we get that question all the time. Would you buy this? Do you think I should buy this? And they'll even offer, I'm paying this. Do you think it's worth that? Should I buy it? Like, again, not qualified, cannot answer it. Cost of repairs.
Like you just said, would you buy it? Would you buy it? I don't know, would you buy it?
I get asked that all the time.
Sometimes, particularly seasoned inspectors that have been around the block, and you have a first-time home buyer. And worse than that, the parents on the first.
No.
Bro,
Swear, I
I'll go-
loved COVID.
Yeah.
Assess the cost of repairs
Yeah,
rather than, you know, a lot of inspectors consult a professional.
yeah,
You know, you have a laundry list of calling a plumber, an electrician, whatever. It's frustrating, we as the agents, trying to keep it all together and still giving them reasonable assessment of correction or upgraded prices.
right.
And I would think the inspectors should be able to at least ballpark it, given your experience.
I agree with that, because, I mean, a lot of home inspectors, it would be more helpful if we could give some sort of guidance on that.
I understand why not, though, because
Right.
there are people that would.
Where's
say
the line?
It's a much more extensive issue on the other
Right.
side.
Well, that's different, then you know.
I think that's why they do it.
And that's why the state tells us that, because where's the line? And if you call 3 different contractors, you're gonna get 3 different prices on stuff, you know what I mean? So it's,
The other problem with that is, like I said, you're an inspector. If someone says, well, how much is it gonna cost you to repair this? Well, it depends. You know, to replace an electric panel now versus replacing an electric panel a year ago or a year from now is gonna change.
look at lumber costs, material costs, right? Everything's different, right?
So unless you keep track of this every day.
Right.
You have no idea.
It's tough, but a lot of times, like the first time home buyers, they're like, can you just give me a ballpark? Like, am I gonna go broke on this? Or do I have that in my bank account? Like, I have no idea. I mean, there's ways that you can kind of dance around that and still not, you know, lose your license. So I'll tell them, like, if I were to do the work, this looks to me like it would take, you know, 2 guys for half a day, and kind of put it in perspective. You have a mason, as long as it's only what we're looking at here, and then there's all those caveats too, right? The normal repair would be this, but you need an electrician to tell you that, blah, blah, blah. I can tell you guys, like, Google is your friend. You just Google average replacement cost of furnace. It's gonna give you a number. That's, like, you could work with that with your
I
ballpark.
also try to just make connections with like electrician contractors. Because
Yeah.
then you can call them and just say, hey, I have this situation, let me send you a report. And they'll usually give you a ballpark, but they're gonna say, if it's any worse than this, like, don't quote me, and this is not a formal quote. This
Right.
is around, like,
This is just, right,
Yeah.
if it's a simple,
Yeah.
and I can show you guys, yeah, for those who haven't seen our reports in a while, I changed the format last year, and there's extra tools in there to kind of help you guys create a list with that. It's super simple. I can show you guys if you want, where you can literally just like type in prices. So if you have your contractor on the phone, how much is it to replace 5 windows? Okay, you just type it in, and then it shows it, it totals it up. It could save you guys a lot of time with that, which I'll show you if you're interested. So other things we're not allowed to do. Cost of repairs, right? Offering to make repairs ourselves. Back in the day, before there was licensing, you just hire a contractor. Well, that'll cost you $5,000. I'll do it for this. I'll do that. And they used it to get work. Obviously, that's a conflict of interest, right? So they don't allow you to do that. For a 2-year period, the only time the exception to that rule is if we missed something and we're responsible for it. Legally, we have the right to repair it versus just hiring Joe Schmo. And the important things is if it's shut down, we're not allowed to turn it on. So again, this isn't something that we're not, you know, required to do. The state tells us not to. So if the power to the house is shut off, we can't flip that breaker. The water to the house is shut off, can't turn that on. If the heating system, if it's just something simple that, hey, in the summer, I shut off the switch to that. Well, that's not a normal operating condition to turn that on and fire up your heating system for the first time. So if you guys are the listing agents for vacant properties or someone who's living in Florida or something like that, there's no on inspection. The home inspector is not going to be able to turn those on. A reasonable inspector is going to say, let's say it's just the buyers and sellers agent not there. Well, if you call the seller's agent, you get permission. If it's turned on, I'll check it, but I can't turn it on. So just be aware of those. The home inspector is not being rude. He's not being lazy. He doesn't want to risk his license.
So the tip you're giving us is to make sure all the areas are accessible, make sure everything you want tested is up and running and on.
Yep.
Because you're not allowed
Exactly.
to actually do these.
Yep. And as this listing agent, you know, we're still a guest in your listing. So we're not going to risk destroying stuff. Yeah.
And Adam, would that include like in the winter, if the air conditioning was shut off, that
So in the winter, you shouldn't run the air conditioning. Generally, if it's less than 60 degrees. If it was below 45 degrees the night before, it shouldn't even be run the next
Oh,
day.
okay.
So if there's guys out there doing that, then, I mean, they're risking damaging it. Like the refrigerant in there, if it's not a temperature, like the oil things, you could ruin the
If you
system.
could turn faucets on and shut them off, see if there's water in the world.
Absolutely. Normal operating conditions. So you should run every fixture with that. So, I mean, on a home inspection, the way we go through is, top to bottom, turning on every single fixture, flush the toilet a bunch of times, work our way down, stress the pipes, flood the drains, look for leaks everywhere.
Actually, flood the drains and then
So, we'll pull the drain stop, so we'll do sinks, tubs, and just, drain them down. We stress them out, I mean, as much as reasonably possible to make sure that there's no leaks with that. But the valves underneath the sinks, not, so if they just turn off the hot water, like the kid's bathroom, because they don't want the kids to burn themselves or something like that, reasonable, right? But we can't turn it on.
Yeah, don't turn those on. This is like the worst. Underneath the sink.
Yeah, and then it's just
This is the
gonna,
worst.
this just happened a couple weeks ago where the
Because that's not
inspector,
working, then you won't be able to-
yeah, the inspector said, well, I can't turn that on, and the agent just decided to turn on the water to the house, and there's something wrong with the laundry, and now water's pouring down. And if my guy did that, who's on the hook for that? So, I mean, I don't advise you guys to do it either, unless you have permission. And I would probably at least get it in a text, so you have it in writing saying, go ahead and turn it on. So again, they're not being rude, it's just part of the standards.
But also what you guys can and can't do. I mean, it's our responsibility to try to rise and
Yes, right, and you guys, I'm sure that's
Before they
all,
come into the home inspection, don't ask them if they what the cost, don't know, this is what they're gonna do.
right.
No, this is the pep talk.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly, just know the limitations,
I know
he's
we're gonna
here.
be here for 2 hours, so if you pop up after you move in, you know that that's what's gonna happen.
You're right, exactly. Setting your buyer's expectations will make your lives easier on the inspection and a lot easier after the inspection. And like we try to set expectations for the client on a home inspection by warning them that you're gonna be terrified with the report. Like, hey, listen, every little thing we talk about is gonna be in the report. It's gonna be scarier, right? It's gonna be scarier on paper. I'm glad that you're here to listen to me, tell you about this, put it in perspective. So if you're panicking, give me a call. But, I mean, not every company or home spec does that, so set those expectations, try to help them with that, so they're not terrified, depending on who you get. Just real quick qualifications, you guys have plenty of qualifications. To get licensed in Mass, it's tough now. They make you do 75 hours of classroom, you pass a national exam, which is actually a pretty high failure rate. Then you need to do 25 observed, and then you're an associate. All you are is an apprentice, pretty much. And then after you work for a year and you do at least another 100, then you're fully licensed. So in Massachusetts, anyone that's fully licensed has done at least 125. And realistically, within that year, you're doing much more than 100 anyway. So most fully licensed guys have done hundreds with that. So New Hampshire, 80 hours, pass the test, you're licensed. Just be aware, if your clients are just, Google somebody and they're like, hey, this guy does it for $250. I want to use
Is there
him.
reciprocity from New Hampshire?
Nope. No, different class. New Hampshire, and this would be online. So you you click through those, it's not even live, click, and you pass the exam. So you literally could be somebody's first inspection they've ever done in New Hampshire. So if you have clients like just Googling, make sure.
I got a client go for an inspector that poked a hole in the ceiling, he said it was wet, I'm like, that's weird. But,
Someone has to repair that hole now.
So if you're licensed in New Hampshire, you still have to take all the stuff in Massachusetts.
If you want to be licensed in Massachusetts, correct. Yep, absolutely. In Maine, no license. However, to set up a radon test, there is a license. So you guys could go. No, to interpret, set it up, pick it up, all that kind of stuff. But to do a radon test is licensed. So in Mass, you guys could set up a radon test, but not do the inspection. Maine is the opposite. Maine's a little backwards, right? So, it is what it is. But just know that, so in case your client looking. It's not recommended. So when it comes to radon, I mean, actually, I can jump ahead just a minute. But I would advise your clients to get the machine as first as can. Yeah, I mean, we sell both, so it doesn't matter to me. So like, if they want cans, fine, get the cans, get the machine. But if you're getting cans, one, who's picking it up? Is it the inspector? Is it the client, or is it you guys, or the seller? Right, and now it's gonna get brought to the lab, or it's gonna get mailed to the lab. Now you have to wait for that period, and then the lab to process it. If you get a machine, well, now it has temperature, pressure, humidity, it has motion sensors, so you know what it's messing with it. Only the inspector is gonna come pick it up, and you get your results that day it's picked up. So for the price difference, it makes a lot more sense to me to use a machine. Like I said, it's not a sales pitch, it doesn't matter to me. But I only talk about my price, but $159 for the machines versus $99 for the cans. But if you guys don't want to pick up the cans and the client doesn't want to, and I'm gonna pick it up, well, now it's another, I think it's, no one ever pays us to do it, but I think we have set it like $35. So now you're at $134 versus $159 for the machine, and I mean,
And then you have wait time and travel time and everything else.
Right. so, I
And you
mean,
have to negotiate, you can negotiate it right on the vacation system, that's the worst part, they want to put sales done.
Right. and now you guys are under a time crunch, you just do the machines. And so if you guys schedule your own inspection, you can set up the machine ahead of time, so then on your inspection day, you have your results right then.
Now, who has to set the machine up? Is that, do we do that?
No, it's us, but I mean, all it is scheduling. If you call to book and you just say, you know, I need an inspection, you go through availability. So like, let's say today's what, Tuesday? And you're like, my inspection's Friday. I want to set the rate on. Well, we'll just get, a lot of times too, you just give us who the listing agent is and we just kind of set it up. How can we get in, whether they give us a lockbox or not, or somebody lets us
So
in.
you set the machine up and then Friday you come and do the.
Yeah,
inspection, pick up
On the inspection, pick it up, here's your
How
results.
long does the machine have to be?
Minimum 48 hours.
You have someone that just does that?
Do that right on that. Just drive around, drop it off, and picking stuff up.
Because I think I can drop it off in Massachusetts.
Yeah. It puts a lot of money on like that. Yeah. Yeah, otherwise it's just impossible to have an inspection. So it made sense to do that. We'll touch on radar a little bit more. So one thing I want to talk about is, again, I want to help you guys know more about inspections here. Has anyone heard about the case Strasburger versus Easton? So back, just quick history of like home inspections, the reason it started, like, yes, it's to provide the service to clients, right? Because they need this and it's relevant. But kind of the real reason why is because before home inspections was a thing, this case happened in the 80s. For people that have been doing it a while, do you remember when home inspections started? It was like in the late 80s. That's when everyone kind of started. It was because it was determined there was a case, Easton versus Strasburger. If you Google it, so I just took a screenshot. The court held that a real estate broker has a duty to diligently inspect a listed property and to disclose to prospective purchasers about that property all facts materially affecting the property that such inspection would reveal. Basically saying that you guys are responsible for inspecting the property.
At the time, it was a buyer.
Right, so it completely fell on the realtors. So remember that as you kind of think towards today, right? So that's what was happening. Realtors were getting sued. They were liable for that. So now home inspections became a thing. Then it was contractors. There were, too much, liability, conflict of interest, and now licensing came. And now, fast forward to today, I bring that up because now with waiving inspections, so remember, there's case law on this. So if you guys suggest to your client that they waive their inspection, and then a year after they move in, there's something wrong with the house, who do you think their attorney's gonna go after? We're not involved in the deal. They can't go after us. It's you. So I know that, there's waivers that you have them sign. If they're waiving their inspection, 100% make sure they're signing a waiver saying that you're not recommending that, they're going against your recommendations, know the risk, all that kind of stuff. However, if you think that's gonna stop an attorney from suing you, you haven't been doing this long enough, because they will try, and those can be fierce. So the other thing that you can help yourself is give other options for that. I mean, I get it. If your clients want to buy a house, a lot of times right now, they can't get it. They can't have a home inspection contingency. But be aware, waiving the home inspection contingency does not mean that they don't get a chance to learn about the house. So I'm going to give you guys a couple options to kind of, again, protect yourself from that. So like, for informational purposes only, right? But we all understand that if they do an forfeit and they can still back out, they're only losing, pennies.
I just wanted to know, does that, if you say that it's for informational purposes only, when you try back out, I would assume that the deposit could potentially be a risk
Right, but if it's before your PNS, what's the deposit? Right. So then it goes
Sometimes
to-
though, they're asking for a lot. I mean, I won't use ever.
Right,
But I
well,
think my
so,
water costs, but-
and they might be doing that to accept an offer with informational purposes only. So like, you guys know better how to get an offer accepted than I do. But if you're waiving it, you know, whether it's for informational purposes, with like a high contingency negotiation to make sure they're not stuck, or if you say for informational purposes, you know, after the PNS or after mortgage commitment or after, you know, it's better to have them inspected prior to closing, just because it helps them prepare to own the house, right? Whether they need to cancel, you know, the furniture order for thousands of dollars so they get a new heating system, whether or not they want to get home warranty to cover their mechanicals for a year, or they want to reconcile with their stepfather who's a contractor who they need help from. Like, there's information that's helpful for them to know prior to owning it. And again, that protects you guys so that they know this stuff prior to moving in. So just know those options. If tell your clients you can get, you know, we're going to waive your contingency, but we're going to tell them, put in writing that I still want it for informational purposes after whatever. You can kind of negotiate that. Or the other is preliminary inspections. So prior to the offer, if you at least want a professional set of eyes on things, just to kind of eliminate big flags, you know, we look at things like open houses with people. Obviously, it's very limited because some of these are like, hey, we only have a half hour. So it's like, okay, we'll do our best. I mean, the contract states it like, hey, this is very limited. It's not documented. This is not a full inspection. We still recommend a full home inspection, all that kind of stuff. But at least it gives them some knowledge of the home to put in a more accurate offer with that kind of thing.
What's the difference between a home inspection and
How much are you seeing in that? Are you seeing it closer to Boston?
So I'd say about 20% of our inspections right now are preliminary. A lot of people are getting those now. Or post-closing, because it's all, I mean, what would you guys say is the percentage of transactions right now that are waiving inspections? 80%. It's high, real high. So it's a lot of people at risk. And so people are kind of, you know, doing pre-offer preliminaries, post-closing. We do them, you know, post-PNS. But that's kind of the reality that you guys are in.
what's the difference between the two?
Sorry, so to answer your question, $299 for the preliminary versus based on square footage where you're looking at over $500. So it's roughly like half the price of that. And the other difference is that the full home inspection, you have that whole scary report that everybody gets. The preliminary, there's no report. So, I mean, we have to, right, we have to document our contract side for our licensing, and I won't bore you guys with the details of that to make sure that we're covered. But it's basically a verbal walkthrough with no documentation, but at least, you know, a lot of times they take notes. So they kind of have that, but at least they know whether the house is a train wreck or not, a little bit kind of thing. So just know these options. So if you have a buyer and you've been working with us for 3 years, and you're like, hey, we can't get an offer accepted. All right, well, I know you really love this house. We did the open house. I'm going to schedule a showing. Let's do a preliminary. It'll cost, you know, $299. We'll waive it. And then we'll even say you can get the full home inspection, you know, later, prior to closing. I mean, you guys can get creative with that, but if you're giving those options, at least you won't get sued.
Yeah, I usually do, if I'm gonna do for informational purposes only, I usually add language of, with the exception of hazardous or structural.
Sure, right, and some people put a
It
dollar.
doesn't usually get accepted.
No. Yeah, and some people put a dollar figure on
Yeah.
that, whether it be, you know, 5, 10, 20 grand, depending on the value of the house, right, everything. But again, it's just knowing those options to give to your clients, so you guys aren't on the hook a year from now. I guarantee you, a year from now, you guys, there's already articles out there, if you look, of realtors getting sued because they told people to waive the inspection and people got stuck.
But every company is right.
Right.
You're sued, you're gonna need that.
Right, yeah. So I mean, this is basically what a preliminary would be. There's different names for it, right? Like, I call it a preliminary because I understand really well on how to cover it. But like a pre-inspection and those kind of things, just, I mean, know that it exists. And again, this is just a kind of, you know, average replacement cost. And this is all relative, right? Quality of material, time that you buy the material, and, you know, square footage and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, these are all big numbers that you guys don't want to come out of your pocket when they call you a year from now, realizing that they need to replace this kind of stuff. So Just be aware. What's covered on an inspection? I can talk about this for an hour, but I'll save you guys the technical stuff. I don't think you can do that. But one thing is, we're just running a test. It's not included on every home inspection. Like I said, we offer it, but if you guys are having your client, shopping around, you may want to tell them, hey, make sure you're getting a termite inspection, because that can be pretty important if there's termite damage in any
It
area.
doesn't include carpenter, it's for, carpenters.
So any WDI, wood string insects, is carpenter bees, fire post beetles, carpenter ants, all that.
Yeah.
People confuse that with a pest inspection a lot. So pests means rodents, everything else versus a WDI. So like we look for stuff that can damage the home, not, mice. That's beyond the scope of the inspection. My guys look at it, and if they see, evidence of mice everywhere, we'll make a note that there's evidence of pests and follow up. But, you live in New England by the woods, you have pests. Exactly, yeah. But again, so inspection reports, again, this is a state. And I kind of told you this, observe and report on what's identified. I want to show you guys just real quick a sample report, because I think this might be helpful to you guys. My Wi-Fi may go. This is the inspection report. So again, everything dictated by the state, right? So roof, all that stuff that they named, the state tells us exactly what to comment on those. Just so you know, our new reports are blue, orange, or red. So we added the blue category for stuff that we're required to write, but realistically, write it on everything. So to kind of make it look less alarming to people a little bit. So just, again, perspective of how much stuff we're required to look at. The one thing I want to show you guys, so, well, a couple tricks just for those who aren't familiar with our new reports yet. If you want to print it or use a PDF, it is the PDF button. Pretty complicated, right? So PDF button, you can either do the summary or the full report. What the summary is, so like if you look at the roof, right, it's broken down. Is it good or is it bad? Is it bad? Put it in perspective, and that's how it's broken down. The general information that the state makes us put, the limitations that the state makes us put, the standards that we have to remind people on. If you want to cut all this out and you just want to look at the bad things, summary button. And now all it is this stuff. So that helps kind of make that easier to use. And the other thing is a tool for buyer's agents that really could save you time. Up here, it's called a repair request builder. If you wanted to, so now it's just showing all the deficiencies, right? Let's say all you wanted were the ones in red. And you said, all right, well, let's put windows in it. Grading, I don't care, but the mold in the attic. These two things I care about. You call a mold guy, he says, how much is that going to be? $5,000. You call the window and you say, hey, I want 10 windows fixed, $500. 5,000 again. And you say, okay, I'm going to generate this report so I can just send it over to the people, and now you have this report.
Now, where is this information coming from?
So you were on the phone with a professional.
That's like if you're calling.
Right. So the realtor, so the home inspector wasn't allowed to give you this, but this is just a tool for you to create this. Really
So
easy.
you get the report and then you start making calls and prevent disruption.
Or to your client, right? So I just want you guys to know that this exists, this form. And you can put notes with it, you can create it as a PDF and send it over. So, I mean, how long does that take me to just create the two things and create a bullet point to send out? Versus you guys are copying and pasting and going through the whole report. So just wanted to share a couple tricks that may save you literally hours sometimes.
Having to cut and paste.
So it's literally just clicking and you can type in comments or repairs and makes it a lot easier. So if the seller's agent is asking for, hey, show me the highlights, show me prices, so they gotta give it to the seller, right? Super simple. I know I did that quick, but I don't want to waste like time. If you have trouble with that, I mean, please just call me. I mean, I can walk you through any of this stuff at any time. And where- This is gonna just be, I'm hoping I'm navigating that before. All right, so I'll get back my brother. Any questions on that on the report though? Pretty straightforward, right? You guys have seen them. But yeah, not a lot of people know about that, especially since I changed the format on the report. The blue category, I think, is helpful to people and that whole repair request.
What's the cause du jour right now that you're seeing reports? Is it still mold?
I mean, mold's always big, water, I mean, I always tell people it's just the big ticket items, right? So whether it's, you know, roof leakage into an attic, I mean, the attic and the basement is where all the problems generally are. Mold scares people, but in my opinion, it shouldn't. I mean, everything in the house can be fixed, but I would say that water into the basement. Stuff like that. Structural, like we said, safety, structural tend to be the biggest thing. Again, just tell you guys, prepare the buyers, right, set expectations. Make sure they know about mass safe. So if they're scared about heating systems, so again, right, negotiation, they're waiving inspections, or they get a preliminary, make sure they know about mass safe. They get rebates, blah, 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 so you can budget for that. 0% loans for 70 years, so you can get a new system. You're paying your loan while, or your bill goes down while you're paying your loan. It's costing you nothing overall, and then 7 years, now you're 7 years into your system. For nothing.
The towns that don't have massive, they usually have like their own.
Yeah, there's usually something that they offer, yeah.
Isn't there another company now? I thought there was another.
It could be right, yeah. I mean, most of the companies I know work through Mass Save, through that program. That's how they get paid, the Mass Save program. But there could be something else, so.
I don't know anyway.
NH Save, oh yeah, you get free power cords, free lights, 75% of installation cost. Every different system has a different type of rebate. So realistically, let's say somebody got preliminary inspection, you find that all their mechanicals are old, you know, maybe about to die. But now they know, and you say, all right, well, now we know that, let's waive the contingency, and we'll get a home warranty for when you move in. So now your mechanicals are covered for the first year, go through Mass Save, try to figure out budget, buys you a year, and at least you knew about it before you went in, versus they knew nothing, they move into the house, everything dies on, and then you guys get that phone call from their attorney. What's the better option, I would say. So again, just know how to help everything and how to spot major issues. I'll just kind of click through these fast. I have a lot of pictures of bad things in the house that I can show you guys. I mean, do you guys want to go through those? There's radon slides and stuff like that. We'll go. Roof, I mean, just always walk around to look for these things, just real quick. There's different intended lifespans on those. I mean, again, rehab versus architectural, 20 years versus 30 plus. The only way to know if an architectural shingle is 30 plus or 50. I've had people, kind of argue that, like mostly sellers, no, that's a 50-year shingle, not a 30. I said at least 30. I didn't see the package it came in, so I have no idea. Rubber roofs can be more depending on the gauge of the rubber. Rolled roofing kind of sucks, to be honest with you, for rubber. Doesn't last very long. Slate lasts your lifetime, but you got to repair it. In metal, it all depends on, you know, the maintenance on it, the fasteners, stuff like that. But that'll last your lifetime too. So here's an example of a precap, perfectly square. Now they start to lift, they grow, they shrink. Right? This one's a mess. This one's a little bit more subtle. Like if it wasn't close up, or if you weren't looking with binoculars, you look from the ground, you might think it's fine, but just like a small area like that.
So people say, well, that's gotta be replaced or it's past its useful life, but yet it's not leaking.
Right.
What determines whether you replace the roof?
So if you're my client and we saw this roof. I say that roof shows excess deterioration, it's, you know, beyond its intended life. I recommend you follow up with the roofer. And it's not for me to say that it needs to be replaced, right? It's, you know, follow up with a roofer, it's beyond its intended life for either repair or replacement. Realistically, I mean, those are brittle, but if it doesn't leak, I always will tell the clients, you know, do you like to gamble? Because every month or year that goes by, you're gambling with it. So same thing with a water heater, right? So if a water heater is 12 years old, that could go in 5 days, or it could go 5 years from now. We don't, you know, we can't really determine that. Acts of fraud, extreme weather conditions and stuff like that. So as long as they're aware that it could start leaking at any time, that's their decision whether or not they think it needs to be replaced. That's how I would.
You're thinking of a listing standpoint, so like if they ask you, you don't need to.
I mean, if the roof's not leaking, aesthetically it's pleasing, but it doesn't need to be replaced. I'm sorry. So, you know,
I think
it's
you
just
guys
like-
actually did an inspection on my listing. And I didn't see.
Yeah.
Right.
There was no evidence of water on the inside, so I think we got it correct. We did it correct.
Right. And we would have
But
said like,
I knew that.
we would have said per roofer or something like that in the wording. So then if a roofer's saying, hey, this needs to,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah,
So
fine. Just get beat up right now,
It's
essentially.
failing and not working.
and if it's not leaking,
So it's just ugly and old. It doesn't need to be replaced.
which would be the same thing as a heating system, right? If it just looks like a jalopy that's corroding and leaking means it's failing, but if it looks like it shows a history of this and that, and it's like, I ran it, it didn't leak, just know that it should be in your budget. You need to be prepared for this, whether it's a day or a year, that kind of thing. Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, that's a good question because if it's not leaking, it hasn't failed yet. It could.
Fire
Next
just
hour.
beat up right now. I feel so bad.
Oh, yeah, you're not gonna negotiate stuff. Trim siding, like on the buyer side, basically, it's, you know, rotted trim and stuff, and it's all about secondary damage. That can lead to, you know, mold, damaged framing, stuff like that. So like, there's a lot of rot around the windows. At some point, if they pull it off, and again, picture, just fast forward, right? And now they move into the house, and a year from now, a contractor comes in, and contractor sees some rot. What's his take on it gonna be? Oh my God, this was just, you need to restyle the entire house. That's gonna cost you 50 grand with me, da, da, da. And now that client is gonna be pretty pissed. The contractors, all those other tradespeople that go in, they are bigger alarmists than any home inspector would know. And they're gonna make it seem like a much bigger deal. So for instance, like that's what we'll find that. Now, yeah, rock damage, termite damage, all types of stuff. Exactly, you guys know how to identify previous termite treatments for those, you know, different people. If you see this, that means that at some point it was either treated or monitored for termites. So not to say that they have them, not to say that they ever have them or ever will, but at some point someone felt the need to treat for termites. So if you ever see that, you know, ask why. So what was the frequency and what was the purpose of it? Why? Yeah, that's in the dirt. Yep, yeah, that's in the mulch. That's
I just, in my house, an old house, and there was termite damage, like the contract, and I have the wooden stakes. And
yeah, the monitoring stakes.
and the concrete aprons around the house, you can see the little drill holes there, like that big.
Yep.
on all the house. And I haven't had a measurement in 35 years.
I mean, that could be a simple,
Once a year, but there was.
Yeah.
I did get the original report, and I know where the damage was.
yep. I mean,
It works.
as long as you have an answer for that, you know what I mean? If the seller just says, oh, I have no idea, but there's evidence everywhere. Versus, oh, 30 years ago, there was termites, I dealt with it, and yeah, that's what you're seeing. Is
Well,
that
clear
there
was
was-
all the stuff.
Oh, yeah, or whatever it is, yeah.
They don't got it. They don't got it.
Right, hasn't changed since, that kind of thing. Heating systems, right, if you're the listing agent, just make sure it turns on, right? Make sure it doesn't leak, because that can scare people on home inspection. And just intended lifespan on those. Generally, if it's water, intended lifespan is 30. If it's air, intended lifespan is 15 to 20. I normally say 20, and I seem to go well past 20 all the time. But if you talk to an HVAC guy, they try to sell them to 15.
What's the life expectancy on a outside water, like a sweeper system.
Oh, like an indirect fired off of the boiler,
Yeah.
20, 25, those are good water heaters.
That's what I have in like
Things like that.
30
Yeah,
years old.
right. And I would, like, all these, I tell people, it's a guideline, not a deadline.
And
Those
also
are,
the maintenance on it.
Right.
If you're maintaining it, having it serviced regularly, then that makes a difference.
a good thing for you guys to help,
Yeah.
for you guys to help guide your clients a little bit is, it's a guideline, not a deadline. It can go well past that if you take care of it and consider it like a car, right? Some people, if their car hits 100,000 miles, they trade it in because they think it's gonna blow up. Other people will ride their car out to like 300,000 miles. Well, it's the same, it's a mechanical device, but take care of it and it's gonna extend the life of it. Gas fired systems require a lot less maintenance. Oil requires annual maintenance. So if there's an older oil one, you can kind of even spin that. It's like, well, at least you know a professional was just here, it's evidence that they were there, or you're gonna have that maintenance, keep a close eye on it. But, so, I mean, that's good things to know. So if you're listing a house and you know that the boiler is 50 years old, it's gonna come up, that be honest and tell you what.
What if we tell them to turn it on, say I represent the buyer, and we tell them to turn everything on, and you guys get there and it's not on, and you can't do it? How does that affect the buyer? So they would come back out, or?
So generally there is a reinspection fee.
Okay.
What I've seen it happen numerous different ways where it's not your fault, it's not the client's fault. So you told them, they told you it was on, and then it wasn't. So like sometimes you can get the listing agent to pay for it, the seller's agent. If it's, I mean, I can tell you guys off the record that if it's causing turmoil on who's paying for the reinspection fee, then we're probably gonna waive it. If it's you guys, then we're just gonna say, we'll just go back out and look at it, unless it's out in Springfield. There's gonna be a travel fee to reinspect it, but generally there would be a reinspection fee, and that's pretty much any company. We try to get anybody to a house for free nowadays.
No, I would expect that to be a deal.
Yeah, but if there's arguments about it, I mean, call me. You won't be paying for it. Oil tanks. So when it comes to oil tanks, this happens a lot. That the seller will say, this company, let's say Hafner's, is making up a name, but Hafner's been filling it for the past 30 years. My oil tank is fine, it's not leaking. We just make a note there's some corrosion, previous seepage at the top, consult the oil guy. And everything, it seems okay. They call Hafner's after they move in. Hafner's comes in and says, I'm not filling this tank. I'm not filling this tank, it's too old, you need a new tank. They're like, what the hell? This person told me it was fine, and the inspector didn't make a big deal of it. Now I can't fill the tank. Well, those big oil companies want zero liability. Some of them say if it's over 20 years, they're not gonna fill it. So they'll fill it for 50 years if you're a client, but they're not going to start a new one because of liability and all that stuff. So keep in mind, they're trying to sell another oil tank and to protect their liability. So when I get that phone call sometimes, I'll tell them, be like, well, call the next oil guy. Because, right, exactly, and they're probably going to be fine to fill it. No one,
More expensive, but they'll come out like in the middle of the night if you need them.
right. Again, if it's not actively leaking, go back to the roof thing, right? If it's not actively dripping, and there's actually things you can do, ultrasound testing on oil tanks. Anyone done with that?
No.
So ultrasound testing, it basically tells you the integrity of the tank from the inside out. So, ultrasound, right? Same thing. And they basically just measure the thickness of the metal at the top of the tank, and they compare it to the bottom. So if there's a drastic difference and it's like, that's about to fall apart, well, then yeah, you probably should get a new tank. If it's fine, well then it's fine. There's nothing to talk about. Because if you think of oil and water, right, doesn't matter. So if water's sitting there corroding down the bottom, you're not gonna know until it starts going up. So just know that that does exist, the ultrasound testing.
Have you seen oil tanks that have the, what they call it, apron wrapped around it? Or that,
I mean, I've seen covered oil tanks wrapped in insulation. I've seen them just,
so this is like a metal.
Oh, the stainless steel.
oh, yeah, they look like a spaceship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those, some of them have like a lifetime warranty on
I
them.
have one of those, it's like, that's so random.
Yeah, I mean, you get what you pay for. You can buy an oil tank that they'll say will last your
So you
lifetime.
see the fill line, the line from the tank to the boiler.
Yeah.
It's still in the slab, you flag that, that's technically a coated, but Massachusetts state, that's all take those up.
Right, well, it gets grandfathered in, and it's allowed if it has either an OSV, an oil safety valve, or if it's properly sleeved. So if it goes underground and it's not sleeved, well then, well, the guy's probably gonna tell you to, run a new one. But technically you are allowed to have it if it has an oil safety valve. But the risk is if it leaks underground, now you're dealing with environmental damage and stuff like that. Right. Yeah, no one wants to fight with the EPA for that. But yeah, like you can put an OSV on it. So if it's properly sleeved and it goes underground, there's nothing to write up.
And if it does let go, it becomes an issue, we can't even stay in the home. Right.
That's why
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to convert to gas.
Best decision.
Depends on who you ask about gas locally.
Yeah, really.
There's been a couple gas
My
issues.
mom was part of that, she's not heat for like a year.
Yeah.
So all the people with oil at that point in time. But, so just real quick example, these are all old systems. If you see these, they're gonna get written as beyond their intended life. Do you guys know the difference between a furnace and a boiler? Not everybody does. And if you mislabel it, a couple things happen. One, you can kind of lose your credibility. And two, you can be liable for it. So if you say something's a boiler or it's a furnace, short answer, if it's water, it's a boiler. So if it's forced on water or steam, it's considered a boiler. A furnace is when it heats the air. So if you're calling a boiler a furnace or vice versa, I mean, I know that, even like I have family members, they just call everything a furnace. They just think heat comes from a furnace, no matter what it is.
If you have an old boiler, you know it's a boiler.
Right. But, so just know that there's a difference in those terms. And if your listing says it's a furnace, so fast forward, right? You label it as a furnace.
Yeah.
Right. You label it as a furnace and they're like, oh, great. So it's forced hot air. So I can have central air. Easy. It's only going to cost me this much for central air. And then they waive everything. They move in. And then they're like, this is forced hot water. This isn't a furnace. Now the AC is going to cost me an extra 10 grand to install all the ductwork. Guess who's paying for it? The person who called it a furnace. So just know that that technical term, give me a worst case scenario as well. You just know that stuff. That one thing.
I'm supposed to be the non-alarmist home inspector.
This isn't on an inspection. Yeah. I'm scaring you guys, but
That's fine.
plumbing, on everything, electrical, you guys familiar with stab lock breakers? Federal Pacific, they're fire hazard, basically gonna have to replace it.
I actually wanted to ask about non-tube specifically, because I've had a few.
Yep.
That if you go to an electrician, they say it is you can still use it, there's nothing against it, there's no like formal like certificate you can get from having it removed. That's what I always have requested when I'm on the listing side, or if I'm on the fire side and I'm scared fire.
If it's all exposed and you know that it's not in contact with anything, then it can be left. However, good luck getting insurance.
Yeah, the whole insurance.
Right, so you're right in everything you just said, and the electricians are right, but it's like, okay, but how do I get insurance on this?
I've had sellers offer to pay first year of insurance, but it doesn't matter, because they're still gonna have to have it. And if you have knowledge too, you have to have your home completely rewired,
Yeah, pretty much. So knob and tube is an issue. I mean, it is a hazard. So the problem, like if you look from the insurance company standpoint, right? So all this knob and tube, it's not in contact with anything. For those not familiar with knob and tube, see how it goes through the wood, through the tube, and goes from porcelain knobs. So it can't be in contact with anything for fire hazard. Once it goes in that wall, what's it touching? I have no idea. Is it insulated? How is it in the attic? Is the attic insulated at all? There's something there. So if it's in contact with anything, well, then it is a fire hazard. So, but if it's perfectly wired with knob and tube, okay, but now you're running into an insurance issue. Find an electrician that's willing to work on knob and tube and leave knob and tube. Now they're opening themselves up for liability for leaving knob and tube. So they're just gonna say, either I'm gonna rewire your whole house or I'm not touching it. So depends on which electrician you ask and the situation with insurance. No, from the agent, I wouldn't get in arguments of whether or not he needs to get it. Hey, if you get an electrician to put in writing that this is fine, well, I think it's nuts, but that's on him.
I was really on the buyer side of the transaction where at the open house, the listing agent said, hey, this is on two of the transactions prior to the sold part. And I was with her at the open house, and then when I submitted the offer, we had the inspection.
Yeah.
And, basically the number two scared her because it was the same thing, and some of it was covered with insulation.
Yeah.
And it was just an issue, so I, said, hey, because we're on a two issue, she's not comfortable moving forward, she's gonna want to do have a home rewired or anything. And he actually, had his client seek counsel and try to keep her deposit, because they said that because she was aware of the number two, that she couldn't back out. I mean, it was obviously nonsense, and we obviously got her money back, but.
Right, but
it becomes an issue for whatever reason.
yes, I can see
And then
that.
the house ended up being completely rewired. That's what we had suggested. We asked for that. They said no.
But then they realized no one's gonna buy a house.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But they let the deal fall apart 2 times. before
Yeah,
they just
the
did it.
legal side, I would, ask an attorney.
Yeah, for $2,500, somebody even more than $2,500 to us.
Yeah, and it depends on the house, right? If it's a, one-story ranch and you can just rerun it in the basement or through the attic, well, that's a lot easier than triple decker where you run it all the way through.
Yeah.
So, if you ever see those push button switches, usually an indication of not too wiring. The only way to confirm it is pull wiring up, which the inspector's not gonna do, but just be aware. It's your listing. But just so you see these, if you see a Federal Pacific panel, and it's a stab lock on it, breakers that look like this, that's bad. So stab lock breakers, basically, that company was lying about their UL ratings and their testing, so that they were saying that they were fine, but they were lying, and it turns out that they weren't always tripping, and houses were burning down. So,
Alex, if you see something like that, what do you suggest?
on the buyer side or the seller side?
On the seller side.
On the seller side, I would say stay in front of it. Well, either disclose it, so that you can try to say, hey, you know about it, don't try to ask for it, or fix it. Yeah, right. So if you disclose it and you say it's priced accordingly, I know that that panel may have to be replaced, and that's why it's priced here. Same thing, I know the roof you're in the market for a new roof, and that's why I priced it accordingly. So don't ask for a new roof. I told you there's knob and tube, so don't come back to me.
It happens.
Yeah.
Real estate is a weird place.
Yeah. Oh, it is. When it comes to cracks, just real quick, I know if you guys get people always panic when they see foundation cracks. But real quick, as far as structural stuff in like poured concrete, foundation cracks, remember there's like 4 bad types of cracks without getting into detail. If it's horizontal, that's bad. It's folding in half. That's going to end bad. If there's like deflection on the wall this way, well, there's some abnormal settling there that needs to be addressed by some sort of engineer. If it's like big enough where you can like stick your finger in it, it's more than 1/4 of an inch, that's too much settling, right? Or if it's like spider webbing off, then that's a concrete issue. It could be pyrite, it could be, bad mix. I won't bore you with those details and all the problems that they're having in Connecticut, but if you see that, that's an issue too. So those 4 things mean that it could be a structural issue with the crack. Other than that, normal settling trinket crack, that's what you're gonna have on poured concrete. And the only reason why you would have to seal them is water intrusion. So if you see a crack like that, there's no water, no history of water, it's a 20-year-old house and it looks fine, there's no reason to repair it. And we're gonna write it as follow up to the history, monitor closely, correct as needed. But that won't go in red. No way. So like real quick, that's the bad one. See this one, like a concrete block, but that actually went a lot further and it was bulging. That's a bad one. X, suspected mold. So, which she was just asking about that, big hot button. You can see, I even say suspected mold. It's ingrained in my head that I can't call it mold.
What do you call it?
Suspected mold. A home inspector is not allowed to diagnose anything as mold. So suspected microbial growth, suspected mold, all that kind of stuff. But realistically, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. That's not it. Right. So I mean, when you guys see this, this isn't a home inspection, so I can tell you, hey, this is mold. This is what mold looks like in an attic. If you see that, that's going to be a problem. The inspector's going to write it up as suspected mold. So if you're on the listing side and you see this, it's going to come up. So you probably want to stay ahead of it. A lot of mold remediation companies will warranty it after they fix it.
A lot of times they'll work with you too, if you sign a contract with them, they'll get feedback.
right. If it's for a real estate transaction, yeah, definitely. But again, attic, that's the most common thing. Radon testing we talked about, but here's the big differences, right? Hourly readings versus the average of the cans, measures all this stuff, just radon. Motion sensors, no idea if it's moved, brought to the lab, instant results picked up by client. I mean, we went over those differences.
I have you guys, you instructed on what's in mind, I think you did the moisture reading upstairs in the attic too. Did you do that? Or,
The moisture reading.
it was like a laser that they put in to see, because the roof was off, and it definitely needed to be replaced. But there was no, I was wrong, there was, it had not failed, so
Yeah,
they had, I think it was like they come in and do like some
It's
sort
very
of.
good.
it was great to meet you.
Was it after our environmental?
I was gonna say we may have subbed it to somebody else, something like that. If we did the inspection, we said, you know, suspect
This
leaking,
will be-
we
The rest of this will be recorded, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's, yeah, it wouldn't have been us, like, we don't do the laser thing, and a lot of times if you do like a surface moisture reading in an attic, that's not really accurate, because the humidity
Yeah.
through an attic is gonna throw off any,
It was in the summer.
any sensor anyway, so that it doesn't necessarily determine if that's leaking. If somebody did like a mold test or something like that,
I don't know, it was too
yeah.
many houses ago for me to
I
actually.
was gonna say, my inspectors carry the surface moisture readings.
Yeah.
So it would have been in, they don't know, don't test it in an attic in the summer, it's gonna come up.
Maybe it was just an additional section, I think that, I don't know.
I actually had to go to a house once because they had a guy telling me he needed to replace their entire roof because it was actively leaking and he found moisture, and I'm like, what did he test it with? And I had to show him, I'm like, look, every single spot in your attic, even the bone dry ones, is saying that there's moisture because there's humidity.
Yeah.
The guy was trying to sell her a whole new roof. I was like, don't buy the roof. You're fine. We're getting to the end, but just real quick, I want you guys to know. The question of the group, if it's an unfinished basement and where would you do the radon test? Unfinished basement, concrete floor, but nothing's finished, and there is enough headroom. Would you do the radon test in the basement? Because I hear some realtors argue this, that it's not living space, so it's not the lowest livable area, and they use these recycled terms to say that that's not an accurate test because it shouldn't be tested in that level.
But it's still tested at the house.
Yeah.
Right, well, so you're saying that we should go to the first floor to test it?
No, I'm saying that you should do it in the basement,
Right.
because that's
where
where
it's
in the
gonna
house,
be.
and that's gonna come up.
And what if
anyway.
they claim to?
Well, so you guys are right, but I've heard people argue this, and I've had people argue with me about it. I said, well, I'm just following the standards of practice set by DEP. So, just real quick, if you go here, boom, boom, if you click on this, current rate on standards of practice, I'll read exactly what it says. Test to be conducted, this sentence, if the lowest level is not finished or could serve as a work area, playroom, or additional bedroom at some time in the future, a test is to be conducted on that level of the home. What's the definition of a work area or a playroom? Pretty vague, if you ask me. So if you throw a workbench down there, is that a work area? So if there's potential that any time in the future, they could put a workbench down there,
Even if you don't intend to finish it, I would just say after my wires, they decide to finish it.
just stand on this. At some time in the future, it could be a work area. If you put a treadmill down there, is that a playroom? I don't know. Those definitions are very vague. Right, so.
Third floor, and it's almost like you get bent over to get down there.
Exactly. Exactly. If it's a dirt floor, if there's no head clearance, then I would say no. But I just want to clarify. So, yeah, I mean, I would say 7 feet. But just know that this is copy and paste. So if someone's trying to tell you that they shouldn't, that can be your defense for them. So just so you know, and I can send you that document if you actually want it. Here is what it is. Or you get it. And that's pretty much it. I mean, any other questions while you have me? Feel free to pick my brain.
Oh, man. I had a question for Frank about lead, but, oh, there's like a refrigerant in some,
Talking about old ACs, R22.
about the R22.
So
That's come up a couple of times.
you can't get it anymore.
Yeah.
So if you guys, if your client has an old AC, I mean, you used to be able to just service it, recharge it, right? And then now it's back up, same with the car. Well, if it has that refrigerant in it, you can't get it anymore. So if it's an old AC like that, that isn't functioning and we're not getting the correct differential, to fix it would probably require replacement.
So there's no like,
Unless you find it on the black market somewhere.
I know that some of the systems can use like R22 or another one.
Yeah,
And then some can't.
And
Do
then
you find
that-
a difference with that the inspection or is that? something you
no,
can check?
that's considered technically exhaustive and invasive. So it's not for us to determine it. Even if like it's written on it, it's, because someone took a marker and wrote that it's, you know,
Yeah.
whatever refrigerant, how do we know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it could be an expensive fix. If it's an old AC and it's not working, they might have to replace it.
And is all this available?
I can send you that whole slide if you want it.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I can email that, and just so you guys have it all.
Thank you guys for 10 years. It was exciting.
Yeah, and thank you
I think
for,
one of my first homes.
Really?
Yeah, my first deal.
well, thank you for always thinking of us, and please use me as a resource anytime with questions, with anything. I'm always available for you guys, you know that. Headquarters is in Methuen. Most of the guys live locally, but, you know, they're kind of spread out, so.
Like I said, I've had you guys up from Shrewsbury, I've had you down in Mashpee, I mean, that's
Oh,
anywhere.
yeah. I think that, yeah, it's great to see you. Take care. We have guys that live as Salt as Bellingham and Marshfield, and then guys that live.
And you do mass and you get.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
In Maine. Yeah, like it, I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah. I didn't print brochure about you.
Oh, wonderful, great, oh, great, great.
Yeah, it's great to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
I have a husband. So congratulations. Are you very excited? It's good that you're here. You see your number with you.
That's great, man. How's it going?
Oh, yes. You're not.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Hi.
Yeah, it's good. I want to wish. Yes, I do.